So we're going to talk a little bit about safely interacting with horses for those of you who don't have a ton of horse experience. And I don't have any helpers today, so this might get a little interesting to record and kind of go through stuff at the same time, but we'll do the best we can here. So this is Cherry. She's going to be one of my volunteers. And first rule of thumb is if you've not really interacted with horses a whole lot, make sure that you kind of respect the animal and make sure you're respecting their owners. Now, in this case, the horses here, we are at the Ag Center currently. Along the horse side, there's Cheyenne, my other volunteer. First things first, you got to make sure you respect the owner's wishes. Now, if you're not sure who the owner is, you probably shouldn't really be messing with the horse a whole lot, or should have somebody who has a little bit of experience with you. Horses can be very adorable, very lovable animals that people absolutely love to do things with, but at the same time, they're big, powerful animals, and they're not just cutesy little pets. So we got to make sure that we're doing things well with them as well. So Cherry here is in her stall. So first things first, if a horse is in a stall, she's like, hey, where are you at, friend? If a horse is at the stall, rule of thumb is at the Ag Center, if the stall window is open, you are free to kind of approach the horse. Now, they're not always going to come out and stick their head out of here, but Cherry is. So if that's the case, feel free to kind of interact with them. Now, as you go to interact with the horse, you need to make sure they're big animals. They take up a lot of space. If you get right up in here in their space and they go to turn around, you're probably going to get bopped in the face. And so just kind of make sure if you're getting close enough to them where you could be in the danger zone when they swing, that you are paying very, very, very close attention to what's going on. Typically, most people do not like their horses' mouths messed with a lot. Some horses will think you're playing games and then kind of go from nipping and lipping a little bit to actually biting, which we don't want. Well-trained horses should not bite, but that doesn't mean they won't. Horses, when they get frightened, will respond with fight or flight. If they're tied to something or in their stall, they can't go anywhere, so they're going to respond by either biting or kicking. And again, if they're in the stall, closest thing to the threat would be its teeth. So, and horses do have pretty big teeth, as you can see. Okay? And now Cherry's not going to want to come out and play anymore. So, if the horse pops his head out and if it comes to play, that's great. You can safely interact with it. Now, if the horse is in its stall, you don't need to cast your whole body in the stall here trying to reach it. You can wait patiently by the door, and if the horse chooses not to come to you, it just might not want to interact with you for the day. If the horse comes out, we might have to find another willing participant. Here's Kitty Joe. If the horse pops its head out and wants to be interacted with, kind of the best places, besides messing down here with its nose, that you could interact with it, would be kind of more the bridge of its nose up here, or kind of the side of its cheek or its neck would be a good spot. Just make sure you're standing with enough space so that way, if the horse turns her head, you don't get bopped in the face, right? So again, make sure you're giving them space. A lot of horses don't always like their ears messed with. Some don't mind it so much. But some horses you do need to be maybe a little bit more careful and respect kind of their space. Other than that, just make sure you're paying attention to what's going on. If the horse gets too shovey, you can either give it a gentle push back, and if it's not responding, just leave it alone and wait for somebody with a little more horse experience to kind of help you out. Anytime you're to go in a stall, please make sure that first off you either have somebody with some horse experience around you, or the owner is present. That way, if something were to go wrong, you kind of have some help troubleshooting. Now we've got Cheyenne out here. Like we said, Cheyenne's kind of an old pro. Anytime that you've got a horse tied up, or anytime that a horse is out of a stall and you have access around it, you need to kind of pay attention to what's going on as well. So we're going to give you the 360 view of old Cheyenne here. There she is. Now Cheyenne's an old pro. She's been at the Ag Center for a while, and you'll notice she's a little on the dirty side tonight. So we're going to give her a nice little loving brushing when we're done kind of taking our video here. So, interacting with Cheyenne. Kitty Joe's mad she's not getting attention. Interacting with Cheyenne, you'll see I've got her tied up with just enough space she can move her head around a little bit. Horses are not like most of the rest of our livestock where we want to tie their head good and tight up in the air, or make sure they're really long down low if they're going to be staying there for a while. Horses we have trained and spent a little bit more time with typically to stand still, and so therefore we're going to respect them by giving them a little extra rope that they can move around with. Now you'll notice she's got some extra space, but she's not going too far. She's just kind of hanging out. Meanwhile, Kitty Joe's not happy. But anyway, we tied her with a quick release knot, so if I go to pull the end, it will come undone quickly. That way, if there's problems, we don't have to worry about sitting and untying that. She is tied to a secure surface, so I tied her to the wall of the stall, not the door, where it will wiggle back and forth or make too much noise here. When Cheyenne is standing here, I'm free to approach her. She's getting impatient with me. I'm free to approach her, typically a good thing when you're interacting with them is to kind of pet them on their neck or basically kind of anywhere up here along their body. Horses don't kick with their front legs, so you don't need to worry about that. If a horse were to kick, this is the number one thing everybody always says, beware of kicking horses. If a horse were to kick, it would kick with its back legs, and horses kick kind of straight back. Not like cattle where they kind of kick off to the side a little bit, okay? The biggest reason why it's dangerous to go behind a horse, or can potentially be dangerous, is because if we look at the way the horse's eye is designed, horses' eyeballs kind of sit off to the side of their head. If Cheyenne gives me a straight-on view here, you'll see when I'm looking straight ahead of her, her eye sticks out just a little bit. Same thing if I go behind her here. So when her head is straight forward, she can actually see almost 360 degrees around her. But there's one little spot that if I come stand directly behind her here, if her head's completely forward, she cannot see. Now she knows I'm here. Her ears are back. She's listening to what I'm saying. I also, if you notice, kind of put my hand up on her hip as I was moving behind her, so she knew exactly where I was. It's not that the horses can't see you why they would spook. It's they don't know you're there or they get startled quickly. And that's when they respond, like I said, by getting rid of the threat, either fight or flight, which in this case would be kick. So, if Cheyenne knows where I'm at and she's not feeling threatened, I should be perfectly fine. Now, if I want to secure myself even better, I'm going to stand closer to her rather than further away. Or I'm going to stand a long ways away. So right now, I'm probably about 5 feet back from her, far enough out of her back legs, reach of range. So I would be okay standing back here. Now, since I've stood back from Cheyenne, if I was going to approach her, I would come up to the side a little bit just so she can kind of see where I'm at before I get closer to her. Or I'm going to stand directly next to her so she knows exactly where I'm at. If I stand next to her, I'm actually I'm actually safer than if I'm standing about 2 or 3 feet away. Because here I'm still close enough she could get to me if she were to decide to kick. And here I'm going to get the full range of her power in her leg. If I'm standing right next to her, when she winds up to kick, I'm not going to get very much force because her leg hasn't had a chance to stretch out yet. Okay? So that's the big reason why we just need to be more careful as we're going behind. So anytime you're going behind a horse, if it's tied up, best thing to do is to either give it plenty of space, like I'm doing right here, or to make sure you're fairly close, kind of make sure the horse knows you're there. You can either put your hand up on its hip, which is kind of my rule of thumb, also kind of gives me an idea of how flighty the horse is, or just make sure that it's watching and has seen you and the horse seems pretty calm before you just move beside it. If the horse is super fidgety and flighty as you're moving around it, you might want to give it just a little bit more space. Okay? So as we said, you can come up here on the neck, kind of anywhere on the body. Feel free to kind of rub them down and interact with them. Excuse me. Not COVID, it's dust. But anyway, that's kind of how we interact with horses as they're tied up. Some horses don't really appreciate their belly may be rubbed as much, so you might need to be a little bit more careful there. If a horse starts to get upset, the first rule of thumb is it will kind of start to swish its tail, perhaps stomp its foot a little bit, but stomping its feet doesn't always mean it's mad. Tail swishing is a good sign of annoyance, but kind of the big thing is if we see the horse pin its ears back like this, that would be a sign it's not a happy camper. Now, if its ears are just facing backwards, like if I'm standing behind her right now talking, her ears are flipped backwards because she's listening to what I'm saying, okay? In order for their ears to be back, they have to be pinned kind of like this, which would be a sign that she's not a happy camper. So if a horse does that, you might want to back off and give it a little space. But other than that, that's kind of our how to interact safely with horses 101.